Recent arrest warrants for Prime Minister Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Gallant have Israelis once again feeling like they're alone in the world. Hi, I'm Hanan Lishinsky. This is another All Israel News update, and today we're talking about the ICC arrest warrants, unprecedented warrants by the International Criminal Court against two of Israel's most senior leaders during the ongoing war. At the start of the video, I just want to mention that if you hear hammering in the background, it's just this construction site right next to our winter studio up here on the roof. We think it's a nice symbol showing that even though the war is going on here in Israel, life continues as usual. Israel continues to build, and this actually is going to be a hotel where we hope that we can welcome many tourists as soon as possible back here in Israel. Anyway, now let's go back to the ICC warrants. One of the main points of these arrest warrants, in my opinion, is that they once again make Israelis feel like they're all alone in the world. No one is standing behind them. Once again, the international community, this international criminal court, is issuing arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant, as I mentioned earlier, the first time that these kind of warrants have been issued against Western leaders. Now, of course, the usual suspects, especially those in the European Union, have already signaled that they would indeed take the unprecedented step of arresting Prime Minister Netanyahu as well as Defense Minister Gallant, former Defense Minister, if they would travel to their countries. For example, the Netherlands, but also, as I said, the usual suspects, Ireland, Spain, Norway, countries that have been very hostile to Israel in the last months, have publicly stated that they would indeed arrest the Israeli leaders. Now, some other countries have not taken a strong position on this issue. For example, Germany has stated, its government spokesman actually stated that due to its history, due to the Nazi atrocities in Germany's past, for example, it would be, he said something like unimaginable for Germany to actually arrest Israel's leader, but the German government really hasn't committed either way and has tried to avoid the topic. However, for example, Germany's foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock, she said that Germany is committed to the International Criminal Court's decision and to international law, so indicated that Germany would indeed arrest the leaders. Just a side note here, of course, this whole question really is a theoretical question, because Netanyahu wouldn't, of course, take the risk of traveling to a country where he wouldn't know whether he would be arrested or not. This is a theoretical issue, and the main point of it is to show support or criticism of Israel. Now, for example, France has also initially not really committed either way, but then indicated that it would follow the arrest warrants of the ICC. However, an interesting wrinkle, as the Lebanon ceasefire talks have continued in the background, there were media reports that yesterday Netanyahu spoke directly with French President Emmanuel Macron in order to advance the ceasefire talks, because Israel reportedly opposed any French involvement in the ceasefire mediation between Lebanon and Israel, because France has been so hostile in recent months, including this ICC warrant issue. And according to those media reports, Netanyahu and Macron reached an agreement where Macron effectively committed not to carry out these arrest warrants, not to respect the ICC arrest warrants, and in exchange, Israel agreed for France to be part of the mediation process, and the ceasefire is expected to be signed today. So despite France changing its tune, and despite, of course, the US publicly opposing this ICC warrant, still the fact remains that 120 or so countries are signed to the ICC's Rome Statutes and are committed to carrying out these arrest warrants, which means that at the moment Netanyahu is somewhat confined and will not be able to travel throughout most of the world. This unprecedented decision comes, of course, against the background of the ongoing war. The ground operations in Lebanon continue despite the ceasefire being apparently just hours away at this point. Operations in Gaza continue as well. Soldiers are dying. And in this situation, Israelis read these news of the ICC arrest warrants, international community supporting them. And of course, Israelis also read the news of what's going on around the world. In the streets of Europe, we saw these pogrom-like attacks against Israelis in Amsterdam. We saw campus protests, numerous anti-Israeli demonstrations, apparently organized by grassroots movements. And even though they may be organized behind the scenes by organizations, pro-Palestinian organizations, for many Israelis it feels unsafe to travel abroad at the moment. And this is something that many maybe don't understand, but for Israelis it really feels safest when they're here at home in Israel, despite war and terrorism and everything that's going on. Now, I will just emphasize that we are speaking about maybe two different things that are going on in parallel. We have the events themselves as they're happening, and then we have how Israelis are interpreting them, how they are feeling about them while reading the news and reading everything that's going on. So what I mean is, for example, as I said, the US, which is the most important country in the world, still has declared that it will not honor these ICC arrest warrants. And with the Trump administration coming in, there is an expectation that the US will sanction the ICC and render all of these arrest warrants moot, and probably most of the Western countries will follow the US's lead. I mentioned that France has already changed its tune. The UK also didn't really commit to carrying out these warrants. For example, in Germany, there are elections upcoming where the largest party is expected to be the right-leaning, centrist-right CDU, which is also very friendly to Israel and is expected to be friendlier than the current left-leaning government. So there is hope, there is reason for optimism. However, again, as I said, in Israel, these kind of some of these nuances sometimes can be lost in the whole picture of the war and of, as I said, protests against Israel worldwide, international community condemning Israel. Also, for example, the whole issue of the humanitarian aid in Gaza has been a constant background noise, similar to the background noise we have here, which has really made an impression on Israelis that once again they're all alone, fighting for their lives, fighting this critical war on 2, 3, 4 fronts, and the world has either forgotten them or is actively trying to prevent Israel from fighting. Another factor in this that's important to mention is, of course, the double standards, which is something that Israel has complained about for a long time. Now here with the ICC, once again, there are events on the ground. For example, the ICC has issued these arrest warrants, but hasn't issued similar warrants for the Syrian President Assad, who has murdered tens of thousands of his own citizens. We have Turkey's President Erdogan bombing Kurdish areas in northern Syria and in Turkey, and this is completely flying under the radar. Nobody cares about it. And there are numerous other examples of world leaders committing atrocities. Iran's leader killing its own civilians, but nobody does anything. Now, this is how it comes. This is what Israelis feel, of course. But if we actually look at how the ICC arrest warrants came about, the reason, or one of the reasons that the ICC hasn't issued arrest warrants against all of these leaders is that it has no jurisdiction over them. But crucially, the ICC gave itself jurisdiction over what is happening here in Israel, because remember, Israel is not a signee to the Rome Statutes which created the court, similar to the US, for example. The US and Israel are not subject to the ICC's jurisdiction, but the ICC decided to give itself jurisdiction by recognizing the Palestinian Authority as the state of Palestine, and then on these grounds, the so-called state of Palestine gave its jurisdiction, handed over its jurisdiction, claimed jurisdiction over Judea and Samaria as well as Gaza to the ICC, and this enabled the ICC to issue arrest warrants over something that is legally should be outside of its purview, outside of its judicial powers, and this is how we get once again to the deep feeling of of this double standard that is being enacted against Israel by the international community, while this is of course being instigated by the Palestinian Authority once again. Summing up, I think we can say that as I indicated earlier, these ICC warrants are unprecedented. They're an important development, but they will probably remain without any consequence. Netanyahu will not be arrested. The Trump administration will probably sanction the ICC into oblivion, more or less, and there will be no tangible outcome out of all of this. But what is certain is that this will once again reinforce this deep sense of being alone in the world, of having to fight against all of the surrounding neighbors as well as the international community here among Israelis. And this is something that, in my opinion, is you can clearly see based deeply in culture as well as even in scripture. Now, for example, one of the most important Bible passages that maybe anchors the Israeli self-identity and the self-understanding of Israel as a state is Ezekiel 37, the Valley of the Dry Bones, which describes these bones and skeletons forming back together and coming back to life. This, of course, symbolizes the state of Israel and as it returned to life. But in the next chapter, in Ezekiel 38, the prophet also foresees a time when the nations will gather as a cloud and the nations will come up against Israel. And these kind of verses, remember, Israel is unlike most Western countries, maybe somewhat like the US. Many people, the broad society, most Israelis really know their Bible. They know many of these Bible verses, even if they're just floating around in culture. And this is something that really influences Israelis. And just at the end here, to sum up, I'll give you a small insight into Israeli pop culture even. And because all of these verses and these prophecies reminded me of a very popular song here in Israel. And the text goes like this: "We are believers, sons of believers, and we have no one to lean on except our Father in heaven." Thank you for joining us once again on this All Israel News update. To keep informed about all that is happening in Israel and the Middle East, visit us on allisrael.com and our social media channels.